the DXpedition NH8S received the DXpedition of the Year award at the Swodexa DX dinner. The gentleman that will be giving a presentation is Craig Thomas, K9CT. I'm sorry, I'm trying to read and they got D9CT and I'm like, no, that's not right. Craig Thomas, K9CT, has been an amateur radio operator since 1967. I was 1 year old, sir.
Oh, God.
And has been a contester and DXer ever since. He is currently on the honor roll with 357 DXCC entities. You got a few extra, right?
Yeah, that's a few extra, a few deleted.
And DXCC Challenge, over 2,700 entries. He has been on the 5 DXpeditions to Cocos Island, Midway Island, Saint Marin, Swains Island, and Conway Reef. We got those all down.
There's some Conway guys out there.
Now, how many out here have worked all 5 of those? You might have worked Craig. He will soon be going to Wake and Amsterdam Islands. Here is Craig to tell you about his latest DXpedition.
Yeah, thank you very much. CQ from November Hotel 8 Sierra. I don't hear anybody. Anyhow, thank you very much for listening. We had a great team. We had a lot of very nice sponsors. Of course, Icom was one of them, and of course the NCDXF, and many people supported us financially. And as you all know, financing is very important to us, so I'll make sure we acknowledge all of these people. And I come to the team, but in a DXpedition like November Hotel 8 Sierra, it's very expensive, especially initially, because everybody wants the money first. You can't pay them later. They want the money for the boat when they leave the dock. So that's a lot of money in this particular case, because they had to gather all of the goods for everything, because we're isolated. There's no store to go to or anything. When you get to the island, the only food that you have is the food that's there. The only fuel that you have is the fuel that's there. And we have to pay for everything in advance, or they won't even leave and take you with them. This is the team. We had a great team, an international team. Barry, a 9V1 Fox Japan from Singapore, AA4NN, who's been on many DXpedition. Jurgen, who I'll tell you about in a minute, DJ2FO, actually got within a quarter mile of Swains Island and had to go back and go into the hospital. So he never set foot on Swains Island, but he's definitely a member of our team. He just got injured, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. DL3DXX, Alan Brown, K5AB, Carl, K9 Charlie Sierra, and next in the call book, myself, Mike, K9NW, Lou, N2TU, who's actually leading the Wake Island DXpedition. We got N6 Hotel Charlie, and he was our doctor, and David, N6HD, Mark, NA6M, ND2T, Tom, who's here. Well, most of these people are here. Hawk, SM5AQD, and Charlie, W6KK, Joe, my co-leader, W8GEX, and W8. On the ride over, he became disoriented and got up in the middle of the night, and we don't know why or anything like that, but he was disoriented and he became injured in the boat. Of course, you're out in the open ocean, and it sliced his legs so severely that we had to have the doctor had to stitch them up right on where we ate, right on the floor, and he had to lay there so that he wouldn't bleed, and we were very afraid of infection, and he was so disoriented we wanted to make sure he got back to medical care right away. So the boat left with him, and he never got a chance to go on the island. But anyhow, initially Joe had come up with this idea of going there. He had been researching many of the ideas about different places to go, and we had co-led several DXpeditions together, 2 or 3, and we wanted to do something. So when he figured out a way to get permission from the people that own the island, which is the Jennings family, plus we had to have permission of the government of American Samoa, then we knew we had to go. So this is kind of the organizational logistics that we have to use whenever we do a DXpedition. This is true regardless. If any DXpedition leaves any of this out, they would be a disaster. So so important that you have permission. This is very important. If you land and you don't have permission, you will not get DXCC to count your trip. So you could make a lot of contacts and have a lot of very unhappy people. So having written permission is vital, and it has to be submitted to DXCC along with the license. The neat thing about the license is that NH8S is actually a call that there's a club in American Samoa for Swains Island, and that was their call, November Hotel 8 Sierra. The unfortunate part of it is, in the planning of it, the person that was the trustee is Larry Gandy, and we'd been working with him, and Larry died literally 3 months before the DXpedition. So we needed to have a new trustee. Well, I'm the new trustee. I mean, I don't want to make it sound that it was that easy, but ultimately I became the trustee for the call. So I assume someday somebody else will have the call, but right now I'm the trustee for the call. We had to put together a cost budget, and the reason you have to do that, first of all, if you can raise the money, how much each team member has to pay, and then also you receive money from the foundations, and you need to show that you have the need. It has to be important enough and significant enough, and with us being it was number 31 on the list of needed, that people would be interested in supporting financially a DXpedition of this sort. And of course, we wanted a really good team, and some elements of the team is they had to be able to spend the time away. They had to be able to risk and be healthy enough to make such a trip, because we knew it'd be hot. We knew there'd be mosquitoes. We knew we had to go on open water and land. We knew we had to cross coral reef, and there's issues that come into play there in just surviving such an unusual environment. It's 11 degrees off the equator, so it's pretty warm. So the team also had to be able to put in $8,000 apiece. So a lot of people, that might be a little steep for them. But of course, this is an experience of your lifetime. So, maybe some people would be willing. But what we try to do is also ask people that we know are good operators and that have some good experience in running rate, because that's what you expect on the other side as a customer, to be entertained and to be worked. And you expect us to have people that are capable of doing that on the team. So the team is very important. We also had a contract, and this is quite important. You need a contract for the boat that you're on and the food and anything that's going to transpire. And so we actually negotiated a contract with the Jennings family, because they had contracted. They did all of the legwork for us in American Samoa, and they got a boat. They made sure that all the equipment was going to get there. They made sure that we had food, refrigerators, everything that you're going to need on an island like that. And so that was in that contract. We also had to have a layout that would work. And if any of you have ever done field day, this is kind of like extreme field day. So one of the issues that you're always faced with when you're setting up for field day is interstation interference. And as you very well know, that's not pleasant. That ruins your field day. So when we're out here on essentially a deserted island, you want to be able to operate, and we decided we're going to have 2 sites, one for CW and one for phone. And on those different sites, obviously, we wanted them separated enough so that we could be on the same band. So you might be on 20 sideband and 20 CW at the very same time, and you don't want to know that the other station's on the air. So we isolated the stations by about 1,500 feet. So there was quite a trek, and we had another 1,500 feet back to where our camp was. So we had to have a layout that would work, and from the layout is how you determine the antennas. So you wonder, why do you do that? Well, you have to kind of go backwards. So we looked at satellite photos, we talked to previous DXpeditions, we talked to the owner of the island, the family that owns it, and we had some surveys that we knew about that we could study to see how much beach we had and what conditions. So the layout is premier in terms of what, and then it leads to the equipment. What equipment? And then getting the sponsors to support you. And I have to tell you, Icom was one of the very first to step forward and support our DXpedition. As you can see, they've supported many DXpeditions, and they've always been outstanding in support of international DXpeditions. So thank you very much to Icom for doing that, for stepping up. And I'm going to tell you a little secret. If you can get a grant from the NCDXF, and if you can get equipment from Icom, you've been blessed. Because the rest of the sponsors and the rest of everybody else comes into play. You get team members that will come on board that you may not be able to get until they already know that the NCDXF and you have major equipment sponsors standing behind it, because they know the people, they trust them to manage the money, because they're always big money. This is in excess of $200,000 trip, so you know they have to trust us to manage the money and not spend it foolishly. And then of course shipping is a big deal, because these places are not places that you can just put it on UPS and they'll make a delivery, even though logistically, you know, they could be involved, but generally that's not true. They're unusual spots. So we had to work out all of those issues. We had to decide where are we going to have all the equipment come so we could ship it, and it had to be put on a boat, and it had to arrive in American Samoa in time for us. We wanted it there before we got there, and then that way we knew the equipment was safely there, and then it had to be put on the island. So those are really big deals, and you have to understand customs and how much money it's going to cost you for shipping, and there's just so many issues that come into play with that. So you learn a lot as you go through these processes of putting these things. If you've ever managed a project, this is a project management. So this is actually Alex Jennings and Rowena, the husband and wife. Alex was the person that we talked to. Him and his brother are the family that own Swains Island. And it's been part of their family for a long time, in excess of maybe 150 years. And it's so Alex was our contact person. He and his wife saw to it that everything was managed, and his brother stayed with us on the island the whole time, David. And I'll show you those people in just a minute. But let me give you some geographic, little bit of picture of where we were going to go. This is just a spot out in the Pacific at about 11 degrees. You can see 11 degrees is right here. And so when you look at this, it's just surrounded by coral. And then there's what you call a normal sand beach. And then that's all jungle. And then this is a freshwater lake. And if you look at this on Google Earth, you'll notice that this is the top of what was probably a volcano. Okay, and that it drops steeply, maybe 1.5 miles down once you get off the edge. So that's just to get an image of what we're dealing with here, that geographically that's the sort of spot that it is. This is what it looks like from an aerial survey, and if you notice, there's a little opening here where the village was, where the natives stayed, and they actually lived there. And these were the people that harvested the coconuts that were sold throughout the Pacific and wherever they were shipped. And this is where the cut is that you can only get on the island. It's not to say you couldn't enter somewhere, but it'd be very, very treacherous. The U.S. Navy or someone had blown out all the coral right in this particular area, and I'm going to show you that it's not a big spot by any means. And you wouldn't, personally, unless you were an experienced seaman, I'm sure you would not even want to go there. So it's very dangerous. You need to come in at high tide. And then preliminarily, I'll tell you that one of the stations was here, and the other station was over in here somewhere. So we had our encampment here, our sideband and Riddy camp was here, and we had a CW camp on the north end there. So we had good shots at Europe and to, well, really anywhere, but you know, we had really good takeoff across the water to North America and Asia. And of course Europe, which was straight north. A very good view of the village, and you can see this is where they brought the coconuts in. They'd load the ship and go off. So that's the way it was organized. And you can see how everything was planted. And there, at one time, actually, there was a road around the island. We all are, just so you know, what we did, because we just jump here to this boat, is that the team all met in Hawaii, in Honolulu, and we enjoyed each other's company for a day, or two actually, because the was it Pacific Air changed, yeah, what? Was it Hawaii Air? Yeah, Hawaiian Air changed the flight after we'd already booked. We had a contract with Hawaiian Airlines to leave on what was it, Monday, I think, or a Sunday? Sunday initially, and then they changed it to Monday. So we actually had an extra day. We'd already booked our flights. Well, what do you do about that? So anyhow, we ended up having to stay an extra day in Honolulu, and then getting on and going down to American Samoa and arriving there, and then staying at a hotel there. What had happened in the in-between is our equipment had been shipped from Long Beach, California, on a barge, on a big ship, in a container, and then it was shipped all the way across the Pacific, and it took about 2 weeks to get there, and it went to Pago Pago. And so they unloaded it there, and they put it on, this also took some time, they put it on another ship that's owned by American Samoa, and the Jennings had arranged to repair an LST, which is a landing craft from World War II. And they put it on that boat, and they came to Swains. They lowered, they were able to unload the landing craft. They had the generators on there, refrigerators, all of our equipment, and made several trips, and were able to come in as a landing craft and land all of the equipment right on the beach. So about a week earlier, before we got there, all of our equipment had been staged on the island, which made us all feel good. The only thing is we didn't know if anything had fallen overboard or if somebody pilfered anything. And so I was pretty upset, or not upset, but concerned. You know, it's one of those things you get nervous. Are all the cables there? Are all the connectors there? Soldering guns, tools, you know, did somebody take something out of that we would need? Because we had a whole list of everything that had to be on that shipment and be there. Another thing they did, they actually had a four-wheeler that they had put on that landing craft, and they brought a four-wheeler on there with a cart. And I'm going to tell you, that was a savings to us that was immense, because walking back and forth on coral that's not really sand, it's really very kind of a sharp type sand that's broken up coral is not very much fun to walk across and carry things with. Here we are. We actually set up a temporary station on the boat. That's AA4NN and Barry 9V1SJ, making sure everything looked good. But you could also tell this boat that we were on was kind of a rust bucket. And this is a boat that they go all the way around in that area, and they take people back and forth like a taxi, or, you know, in one day you could be to Samoa, or, you know, just take you from island to island. So they had a route that they would go on, and what they had done was rented the boat to take us there and leave us. We had no way to leave. They left us, and they would go back, and then they would come back again for us again. So that's why when we had a medical issue, we wanted to make sure that they were sent back. Because there was no way, if somebody got an infection or something happened on the island, then we were concerned for their health and safety. So anyhow, we made it across, and as we went, we actually had a meeting of the team. I assume some of you have been on boats and understand that it's hard to stand up, and we're out in open ocean water, and it doesn't matter how big the boat is, you're going to get flopped around unless you've been on a big cruise line, a big cruise. This is not that kind of boat. This is a boat that really moves around with the ocean quite a bit, and it's hard to stand up. It would be easy to get seasick if you didn't wear a scopoline patch or have some other medical help. It would be tough. I don't know too many people that went across that did not. In fact, the natives actually sat outside, I think, most of the time across. The people that live in the area actually just sat in seats and fell asleep there, still sitting there the whole time. They never moved around. I don't recall them eating too much, but they knew that it was not going to be pleasant. So anyhow, what we did is we talked about safety. You can imagine the sort of meeting you'd have with your team. We had a team meeting, and we discussed everything on the boat. We discussed how we were going to operate, how the exchanges were going to be. It's not that these people didn't know, because we had a lot, but we wanted everybody on the same page as to how do we want to do this, and how do we work the customers, all of you, the DXers, how do we work them in the most efficient manner possible, so that we could, one of our objectives was to work as many uniques as we possibly could. And you say, well, what's unique? Well, the idea is to make sure that we get as many unique calls. So it'd be easy for you to say work us 6 times on 6 different bands. But what would happen is when we went to the next band, you'd be there and you're louder than maybe the guy with 100 water. But you see what I'm saying? And then so we'd miss, because we changed bands, we maybe miss somebody. So we always made it a goal of ours to work as many low power stations at home as possible. And actually, I think we're in the top 10 all-time list for doing that. So we met our goal. But these are the sort of things that we discuss in preparation in terms of going out for a DXpedition, and that's when we do it. When we arrived, this is how we departed the plane. The boat. They had these boats, and they had obviously motors that they put on them. We actually had two, and here we are being transported with these really nice life preservers we had to put on, and that's a crew member. And here we are coming in for this is how you would come in to land. And this is the cut that I was telling you about. It's very narrow. And look at how it drops off. And so you can imagine as the tide changes, you know, the currents would be huge going out. So this would be a poor time to come on the island. So you had to wait for the right tide time to come on the island. So what they do is they'd wait until there was about 3 or 4 foot of water above the coral. And then that's when they would make their mad rush on, and we'd all come on, because soon it would reverse and start going back out, and then of course you're fighting the current with the outgoing tide. Of course, I'm not a mariner, and a lot of the people on the trip are not, so you have to use the common sense of the people that know these things, the native people, to do the right thing. They tell you this is a good time to do something. You leave when they say to leave. You come on the island when it's the right time to come on the island. You do what they say. So anyhow, this is the cut. So you can see there's no way a boat could get across the coral at low tide. That's the only way to get in. This is the widest part. This is what we saw when we arrived. This is what the services provided by the Jennings family. This is nothing that you see here was there. They had built this in the week prior to our arrival with the money that we'd given them under our contract. So we had them under contract to provide us with sleeping areas, a eating area. This is actually the equipment that we had that were on pallets. You can see it right here. And this was brought on and then conveyed over here for us and then covered, so that we'd have everything was under cover when we arrived. And this is everything that we'd prepared and put on the boat in Long Beach. So here we arrive, and what we did is we divided the team into 3 groups because of the schedule of operating. And there's so many things that come together to make this all work, but we wanted people to sleep together that were going to operate together, because as the shift change occurred, it was easy to say, hey, we got to get up. We need to get up now, because we'd be on, say, for 3 hours, we'd be off for 6, and then you're back on for 3. You never really got a good sleep. So it was important, right? We never got a good sleep. So, some of the team members are here, and so it's one of those things where we just kept kind of a buddy system. And the other thing is we didn't want to wake people to sleep, so we'd have one group here, and one group here, and so we just tried to not bother each other. But that was the layout that we used. Here we are just bringing in the people. That's Joe, AA4NN. Everybody helped get everything on. So you'd pack your bag, just like you're going to a motel or whatever, everything you need on the island, and you'd get on shore. Now, I put this on here because this is a very interesting thing that I didn't know. But we discovered it at the bar in American Samoa. And this is unusual. This is things that you would not see in the United States at all. But this is a Polynesian thing. And we were kind of observing this behavior of normally we just say, you know, here we talk about same-sex marriage and those kind of, you know, that sort of behavior. That's not at all what this means. This is completely different. These were people that were raised as a third gender to help people, and they would work just as servants to work. And you couldn't tell in some cases that they were a man or a woman or whatever. In fact, don't even guess. Just let them tell you their name. But we found out that this is very normal. People maybe would raise a boy and raise a girl, and then they would raise this third gender, a fa'afini. I tell you that so when you go to the area, should you visit, this is a very unusual thing. Google it sometime and you'll see what it. I say it's unusual. To them, it's not. It's just a normal thing. So we went to the bar. The bartenders were that. We had certainly one person on our. And the reason I show you that is this is Sula, and Sula is one of those. And so Sula dressed as a girl, but she wasn't. So anyhow, it's kind of a side unusual thing that we noticed when the area, and of course they see all the, it's kind of like you went on an advanced picnic. They had all, like cooking stoves and refrigerators and stuff. But when it's 100 and some degrees out, how much does a refrigerator cool? How much does a freezer cool? How much does your air conditioner? Yeah, I'm sure you've had hot days in your house. When it's hot out, it only cools so much. So no matter what the cooling devices were, there was only a range that it could cool. So I just point that out too. Here's an area that they had made for us that we would meet to eat every day, and they had 2 meals for us. They had breakfast and they had dinner, and we arranged our shift change based upon that schedule. We told them what we wanted, but that's how it all worked, so we could do that. And this is where we'd meet, but obviously there were always at least 6 people missing. So we had 18 people, so we had 6, 6, and 6. So the most you'd ever have in one spot would be 18 once we started operating. So that was also good because then nobody bothered an operator that was operating. They were isolated, they were able to focus on what they were doing, and they could operate. So here, what is this thing right here? A BGAN. Thank you for this is actually where we had set up a deal. This is a BGAN unit, and it allows us to use the internet here. There is no internet unless you can connect with a satellite. So we'd leased this, and it's very, very expensive. We paid, I think, $2,000 for the time to be on. We had a chip that we could use, and that's how we had the time to be able. And this is how we uploaded the logs to Club Log. We sent, and we also had an email system set up, and they were on 4-hour cycles. So what we could do, we had our own email so that we wouldn't receive the normal email that we'd get on our smartphone or wherever you get it. We only gave that email address to loved ones or people that we trusted to just send us very important messages, like there's a tsunami or something, okay? So, but the problem with this whole method was that you could sit down and you could type an email, and it would only be sent, let's say the mail had just been retrieved, 4 hours later would it be sent. So assuming the next person got your email, they would respond to you immediately, but it would still be at least another 4 hours before you'd see it. So the earliest that you'd ever see a response to your email would be 8 hours. So if there was some issue with the logs or some issue that you needed to know about, it took a while. But here we are, Joe and I, we were the 2 co-leaders. We're studying, actually we were reading the reviews that say Valerie had sent us, and John, K6MM, who was did our website and stuff, they grabbed the information from you, and they'd say, there's an opening you need to know about. There's a 10-meter opening at such and such a time. Would you watch for it? Okay, and that's how we knew to do these things. So that was an important thing. And that's Mark. He maintained all of that, and he also had a satellite phone, and I think Jerry had a satellite phone. And so we could actually call and talk if we really had an emergency. We had a sat phone that we could immediately do. Just so you know, the BGAN unit, we could actually override it, and we could do something urgently if we had to do something urgently. But that's how we kept it up to minimize our amount of time that we were using the unit. So that's just a view of what it's like, and the tents and the sleeping tents, and it became very hot. Notice that they're exposed to the sun, and the reason they are here is because the mosquitoes live there. Okay, and there's a lot more of them than there were us. They didn't like it out here. Well, neither did we, actually, but we didn't like the mosquitoes very much. So all you had to do was just walk back, and you had new friends. But if you stayed out here where there's a little breeze and you were out on the beach, they did not bother you. I'm not going to say that they didn't bother you, but there was a lot less bother than if you were on the other side of that. This is what it looked like. We had no room service. Nobody made our beds. Nobody did anything. We were responsible for ourselves. They had these military cots or cots of some sort for us. The only blanket or, a pad or anything like that you had is if something that you brought, like an air mattress or whatever. I think they provided a sheet and a pillow for everybody. And then we had one towel that they provided. So if you needed anything else, you needed to bring it. But you'll notice there was some cardboard and that sort of thing, because this is all coral under here, and you sink. Over time, you just kind of sink into this stuff. So, that's just an example. There were fans, but believe me, hot air is hot air. no matter at what speed it is. You know. This is another thing that they did that was incredibly cool. This is a two-station outhouse with actually flushing toilets. And what they did is they took rainwater, and that would go into the side of the toilet, and it would fill, and you were responsible for filling your toilet. So you opened up the valve, let the water come in, fill it up, and then you'd flush. And if you were really nice, you'd fill the water for the next customer. So that was our, and they actually had a septic system. It wasn't really a septic system, but it'd go back, and they dug a great big hole, and they had the, you know, the sewage going into that area. So this was pretty cool. This was like a modern convenience. But keep in mind, this is back where the mosquitoes are. So you didn't want to contemplate what you needed to do too long. So, yeah, but it was pretty cool to be back here. This was our shower. It actually wasn't a shower. I think initially they wanted it to be a shower, but it turned into a rain barrel with a, I'd call it a soup bowl or something like that, that you take and you dip it over your head and you'd splash yourself and get clean. Everybody did that once a day. That was part of our rules, by the way. You will clean up every day. We want you to be friendly and nice and all of that stuff. So, but everybody did that. The trouble with that is you'd get all clean, and now you walk out of this mosquito netting, and the mosquitoes find you immediately. And as you walked back to your tent, you just noticed one by one you had a mosquito bite. So you'd get back to the tent, and the first thing you did was put on your mosquito repellent. Now keep in mind, you just took a shower, and now you're rubbing mosquito repellent all over your entire body. And it's like you never took a shower again because you're sweating immediately. But you know, at least we went through the motions of getting cleaned up every day. But that was our facilities. This was an awesome thing to have on the island. This is what they used to set it up. They hauled the generators up to the locations. A lot of our gear, the antennas, the cables, everything, we hauled up on that. And we walked. We got good exercise every day. Not until later in the DXpedition did we actually ride on that, because a lot of people wanted to walk. And of course, in the middle of the night, you know, that was their machine. They ran it back and forth. But we had some people so exhausted that they would come out and finally get us, especially in the middle of the day. This was the actual setup. So this is something I had sent to them as a layout, and then in a PDF attachment to an email, and then they needed to interpret what this all meant to them. And so the idea is there's a tree line, and behind us these palms some of them were as high as 90 feet. So that was actually some of our backup plan on antennas. We took wire, we took everything in case we wanted to have some wire antenna. We knew we had 90-foot trees behind us so we could do. But keep in mind the mosquitoes, and we also found out it's really jungle. But anyhow, most of these are SVDA antennas, which are two-element antennas. What they are is you have a driven element, and then you have a passive reflector or director, depending on how you make the jumper. Okay? So keep in mind that this way is Europe and the United States and Asia, because these are big lobes. You know, it's just a two-element. It'd be no different than a two-element Yagi. You know, you have a huge pattern, but all the gain goes this way. So what we'd have is we'd set this up as the reflector, and that's the driven element. So you'd have one coax coming back. This was a DX Engineering vertical, and this was this is the CW site. So that was the BCS, the Battle Creek Special, and then we had what was the 80 meter? That was no, this was the BCS, and that was the Titan X. Isn't that correct? I think that's how we set it up. The BCS and the Titan X. The BCS actually will operate on 160, 80, and 40, and that actually came into play. And the Titan X would do also a couple of different bands too. But we wanted our tentative plan was to do it this way, and then have the 40 off here to isolate it. And you notice what we did is we tried to keep adjacent bands away from each other, so that because we'd have 3 operators on at all times. So if you notice, this is how you'd set up your own field day site, except you wouldn't operate 160 meters or something, but you'd want to keep stuff isolated enough so that you wouldn't bother each other. So that was the tentative plan, and this is the actual installation. So can you see the antennas right in here? The verticals all along here. So what would happen is we thought that we had set them up at a high tide, so that the water, when it came up to high tide, would not reach them. And in fact, we found out that when there's a storm, the high tide is higher than the high tide because there's a surge that comes in with it, and then some things will fall down. So what we do is we take rebar, and we had them supply us with rebar about 3 feet long or 2 feet long, and we pound it down, set the insulated piece down on top of it, and then we'd put in guys. So we'd set up the teams, and we'd go out and we'd set up all of these antennas. Here we are actually doing that. This is Arnie, our doctor, myself, Mark, David, and I think that's you, isn't it, Al? Right back here. And I don't recall what this particular antenna is. Do you? Is that one of the verticals? But we had a sledge, and we were out there working our butts off. We worked for 2 days setting this up, and it was absolutely exhausting. We got to a point we just knew by 11 o'clock in the morning that you had to quit work. We had people falling to their knees. We had talked about having Gatorade and water all the time, but it didn't matter. People were just getting totally exhausted. It was always in excess of 110 degrees by about that time, and until about 4 or 5 o'clock. And keep in mind that we were exposed to the west sun at this point in time too. We were just zapped. So we set all this up. It looks beautiful, but it's really hot. Oh, here's a better picture of it. So what do you think of that? That's a lot of work. But by 5 o'clock on the second day, we decided to start our shifts because we knew that we needed to start operating. We had lots of customers waiting, and our team was very excited. They were so exhausted. We needed to say, you 6 operate, and then the rest of you rest, and then let's start our shifts. And whatever antennas were left to be done, we'll do the next day, and we'll do it in the early morning after breakfast, and then we'll quit. This is... oops, that went by quickly. How do you back up? I guess you don't. Is there a way? Page up. Maybe not. Yeah. We had pre-made a lot of the radials. I don't know. Did we do the aluminum ones early? I don't remember. This isn't a real... this is aluminum wire. I wouldn't recommend you do that. That was really tough on us. The ones that really work well are the... not the stranded, shielded, stranded with a PVC jacket. Those are the best, and you could roll them up and then roll them out. These had a tendency to roll up on their own. Even if we buried them under sand or whatever, they tended, because there was all this walking traffic back and forth and we had radials everywhere. This is for the verticals, of course, not the SVDAs. But you'd notice, see how that's aluminum wire. And other than just really like maybe for a day or two, I wouldn't recommend using that for your radial system. But that's a typical, that's your Rube Goldberg setup, because you had another plate and everything we never found, right? That was supposed to be on there. But that was our 80-meter DX engineering, right? With a choke. And then here's actually the CW site, and you'll notice it's a narrower beach here than it was down at the sideband site. And so this is where we really got hit bad with when the storm surges would come in, and we had to be very careful about the water. Here we are working. That's Jerry right there. That was Jerry Clark here back there. You got a picture of both of you guys working, and you can see them hauling stuff back and forth. So we worked very, very hard getting this all set up, putting things together. Jerry, we have you working a lot. Yeah, because you were one of the suppliers, sponsors of us was Primus Cable, and Jerry had pre-made a lot of the cables and rolled them all out. But as you notice, because we had so many antennas, you had a lot of cables. And because of the distances, you had to be careful. You had to lay out the right cable with the right antenna because we had them pre-made. So we had to be careful when we laid them out that there wasn't longer or further away than what we had coax for. So anyhow, that's Arnie setting that up, and Mark. So here we are. You can just see it was just a lot of work. And now it's at low tide. See the difference? So see all the coral down here. This is what it was really like along the bottom. So that's a dead coral, but it's very sharp, and you can get hurt on it. Here we are setting up our station. Several pictures. This is actual operating. Mike K9NW, who only lives a 30-minute drive from here, and you'll notice the Icom radios, and we had the Heil headsets on, and we had an interface that was made by i8 NHJ that used the USB port of the Icom radio. So it was pretty neat. All you do is we had 2 Icom interfaces plugged directly in the computer, and the Icom radios are fantastic for that. You can be on RTTY, CW, and have PTT with just 2 USB connections. So it's pretty slick to be able to do that, and it's one advantage of using an Icom radio. There's Jerry operating and Charlie. So what we do, as we had a shift change come on, this was a phone site, and so you can see they have their microphone down, and they're talking and logging as fast as they possibly can in extreme heat. So there's some fans blowing on us, but it just was very, very warm. And notice the jungle right behind here. What they had done was they had put a tent with mosquito netting on it, and over that tent was a rain cover, so that we had 2 tents at every site, one over each other. Here we are. That's Barry and Arnie. Boy, this just jumps by. Go back to that. But I liked, see there's the fan that just kind of oscillated back and forth, and they're logging. But you can see the jungle is very, very close here. This is actually, again, the phone site, and it was kind of tricky sitting here because this is the beach, and you're always kind of listing to the right, and if you didn't stay on this board, you were going to list to the point where you fell over, because it would just keep sinking and sinking and sinking into the coral. But anyhow, that's what the conditions were like. We always had Gatorade and water. They kept them over here in a cooler for us, and you can see the Icom radio right there. And what we did, we had N1MM. I believe he's doing, the RTTY station was over. That's Lou N2TU. He was probably doing RTTY, I'm guessing. Dietmar, David. They're watching. He must be on a phone in this particular thing, but this is the station we used quite a bit for RTTY after we started. Show the CW site here. That's Alan Brown. I think we're over in CW now. This is myself operating Icom radio. That was a KPA 500, but we used that only on the very high bands. We had PW1s right behind here that were used on 160, 80, and 40 because we wanted to make sure we had high power for those bands, because we wanted to be in control of the pileups. And the only way you can be in control of a pileup is be loud enough that your customers, all of the DXers out there, knew you were on. If you have QRM and the station's weak, when there's QRM, people transmit inadvertently or make a mistake on splits and things like that. It's good for the DX station to be much louder. And so we wanted to make sure that we were loud on 160, 80, and 40, and they were very nice. Actually, we were having a hard time getting amplifiers, and they were very nice in making sure we had the PW1s. So we had plenty of amplifiers. Some of the operating. You can just tell everybody's really tired and really hot. I'm going to tell you, though, despite all of that, everybody, we'd warned everybody about this, that don't get offended if somebody says something to you they didn't mean it, and to be cautious about saying or even criticizing somebody about operating or anything like that. That if they saw something, to come to us and we would deal with it. We didn't want anybody upset with each other. I'm going to tell you, we never had that. But I think also it helped to talk about it at the beginning, because everybody got so exhausted. Nobody got 8 hours of sleep. It was really, really hard. There's the PW1s. They worked awesome. They made us loud. We had 2 generators at each site, and they had it set up so that we were never off the air. They changed the fuel for us. They changed the oil. They did everything. They had spare generators. If they changed the oil, they took the generator away, changed the oil, and brought it back. And what they did is they brought another generator that had already had the oil changed, so the transition was seamless. And as an operator, you never heard from us, stand by, we got to do something. You knew we were just going to keep at that pileup. The only time that there'd been a change is if we changed bands or changed operators, that you'd hear anything. But we always tried to tell you what was going on. And there's Lou, and very happy because here he is sitting there with N1MM and MMTTY, and he's just going crazy on 28088, making a bunch of people happy on 10-meter RTTY. And that's ND2T. And of course, here we are at the CW site. And you notice, see the rain flaps, and that was very helpful to us because a lot of the storms would come in the afternoon. It'd be no different than, say, being in Florida in the afternoon, you know, when you can expect that afternoon shower, but sometimes you could just see the storms off in the on the ocean, and then they'd move in. In fact, I'll show you here pretty soon. Oh, there's Coco. We find him. That he became our, I guess, our symbol, our part of our logo. Our mascot, that's right. But he was everywhere. He was wearing headphones there. We had a club make up these. These were very nice. They're made out of what? Lexan, plexiglass. And notice once we hooked up the coax, we said that's 12 meters, and then that's 30-meter RTTY, and that's 15 and everything. So because you're so tired, you didn't want to make a mistake and hook up something wrong. So there's two things that you can really mess up. One is the wrong filter. And if you don't know, when you do anything like this, you need a band filter per band because every radio will have a harmonic, even though the content may be down quite a bit. But you're next to somebody operating in the harmonic, it's a real problem. So what we did is we had filters, and then we had resonant antennas. So we made sure that we were always on the right antenna because you don't want to hurt your radios or your amplifiers because you don't have any spare anything. I mean, you do, but you don't want to blow up something. That's the word. So those were very helpful to us, especially with as many antennas as we had. And I don't know what he's doing, but he's fixing something. Alan did a lot of that. There's always something. I took this picture because I wanted to just see how bad or how good, whatever the jungle is. This is not some place you just took off and went into. So if you wouldn't want to anyhow because of mosquitoes that just eat you alive. But this was what they had done is they took machetes and they cleared all of these places where they put our tents, our operating tents. And so they'd arrived a week earlier and had a crew of about 12 guys, and they just worked everywhere to clear it and get it ready for us. Here we are operating the PW1s. That's Joe. Notice the USB lights. They're very inexpensive. I highly recommend them for field day or anything like that. You just plug them in the side of your laptop. You can see the keyboard so you can type. And the other thing is it doesn't put a glare. The glare on your LCD screen just drive you crazy. But I highly recommend these. You need that. It's less than a $10 item, and you can do field day or any outdoor activity at night and see what you're doing. This is an example of that's David pointing to what was impending. So that would be a little bit to the northeast of us from the CW site, and you can see actually where one of the anchors is. What we do is we drive in a piece of rebar, and that's what we did. And the reason we did that is you can pull them back out. You can wiggle them in the coral and ultimately pull them out and then clean everything off as if you were not there. But that's what we used. Unfortunately, if the tide comes in, it will do the wiggling for you, and then that will come out, and then your antenna will fall down. So when we had the storm surge come in at high tide, so it's at low tide now. So you can tell the break right here where the coral would start, those waves would then, once the tide comes up, they would just keep coming. And so you're sitting in your tent, and the next thing you know, there's the ocean and these storm surges. So we had no idea. Actually, the people that hosted us were concerned that we would get overrun with water. They thought we couldn't do this, and I'm going to tell you, if there were too many storms, we probably couldn't have. But we really only had one that was of any significance, and it did this to our 80-meter antenna. See that? This is what happens when you lose your support, and it ended up bending a very, very nice DX Engineering antenna. So, unfortunately. And this is a setup that we had. See how they had it so they keep off the rainwater. They had brought in gasoline for us. There it is. That's our fuel depot. And these were the empty ones, and these were the full ones. And then they would pump them up, and they'd haul them to us on those and fill them up while we were operating. This is where you'd change pages. There it is. Giving you a quick tour, there was a village here. How are we doing on time? Okay, good. This is actually a church on the island. They had 2 church services there while we were there, and David, our host, who I will show you a picture of here in a minute, but you'd go into this and you'd find books written in Samoan, and it's really neat that they did that. But you could go there and see how the natives went to church and go around. This is actually a marker on the island. That's Joe next to it, and here we are, elevation of 10 feet. And one of the other things that we did while we were there is we fixed and set up a marine radio system so that they could communicate from here back to the, I'd call it mainland, but that'd be wrong, another island, American Samoa, so that they'd have it. And so here it is, all fixed up. They did all of this work for them. And this was a dummy load. You all remember that? This is a dummy load from your novice days, anybody that was ever a novice, or a general, I guess, way back when. Testing the marine radio, we got it all working. See, the thought is there, it's working. And so here it is. I didn't mean to jump right to food. It'd probably make you all hungry and leave me. But this was actually a medical building that they had in the little village, and they had set up the marine radio here so that if they had an emergency, somebody came to the island, had an emergency, that they could communicate and get help. Because the island is now empty. It costs so much to bring food to the people that were there, because you can't just eat what's there, but that they decided that they couldn't do that anymore. So they took all the people off about a year and a half prior to us arriving. So what had happened, though, just so you know, when they found out that we were going, all of the people that had been born there wanted to go. So that was an issue that they had to address, not us, but it was a problem. This is food that they got right out of their garden, right out of the ocean. And the natives loved to fish. And they'd go out every day, and they had more food to eat that they had to finally say no more because they couldn't store it. They brought in fish, and they ended up drying it and salting it so that they could keep it. But they could bring in fish. But you notice the lobster. And they also had a coconut crab, which I'll show you. But these are the bananas that they brought in. See how they'd cleaned all of this grove out? It's a beautiful area. This is where we'd go to try to get cooler during the day. But it was very difficult. There was to get cool. But this is the sort of meals that we might have. This is the breakfast that we got served. We did not hurt for food. We were in good shape. You'll notice how we opened up. Here's coconut, but we had coconut crabs too, and I'm going to show you that. That's by the way, that was David Jennings. I'll take that back. That's David Jennings, who is Alex's brother. And there's a little story here. His father lives in Danville, Illinois. Their father lives in Danville, Illinois. So not too far from us is part of the family that owns this island. So that's Hawk holding one of the native species. And the price was right, once you were there, of course. But they were there for the taking. What would happen is there was these pools of, when the water would go out, there'd be pools of water. And they'd go out there and they'd say, oh, there's one. And they'd just pull it right out. So that's the way to get a lobster, right? Look at the size of these fish. And these guys love to fish. And this is Larry Gandy's wife, Udi. And so after Udi decided she wanted to go, and Udi is a ham, and if you ever go to American Samoa, you can operate at her house. In fact, her radios didn't work. And so as a team, we brought all those radios back when we came back to the United States. We got them fixed, and we returned them to her. We also left all of our coax with her and other things so that her station works. So if you go to American Samoa, you can operate there. You just call up Udi on the phone, and you can be a KH8. Cool, huh? So, I think almost every DXpedition does this. They leave stuff to help or do things to help the people. So, because it's very difficult to get things repaired when you're out that far from anywhere. So, but there's all the fish, and we ended up eating all of these. Here they're cooking ribs for us, which is not native, of course. They'd hauled those here. I didn't see any cattle or pigs running around. I guess there was a pig, maybe. I don't know. I never saw one. I probably would have been scared to death if I saw a pig, but this is kind of interesting. No one is allowed to fish in this area. This is a restricted area. And no boat is allowed to land here. So this boat pulls up. And, of course, we're thinking pirates or something. But they knew the people on the island, and they sought permission to land. And this was their gift to them for allowing them to land. I don't know what they needed. They needed some help or needed something. But this was their gift, and they carried it so that they could see as a gift, I'm bringing to you fish, as if we needed more. But and notice that I see. Oops, back up. That was an important slide too. But see these? You won't see them anywhere. That's a coconut crab. Guess what they eat? Coconuts. And they're blue, and they are sweet crab meat. They are really. This is an unbelievable treat to have them cook those for you, and you have crab meat that tastes like coconut. Look at the beer. I'm going to tell you, though, I'm sure you all know we'd all love a cold beer. This would be warm beer that was less than the hot air around it. It was in a freezer, but it just never got cold. But there was a lot of time. See, we needed refreshments. That's, how do you say that, sushimi? Yes. Yeah, from raw tuna. And they said it was great. Notice they said it was great. I didn't, because I didn't try it. I didn't have the nerve, but they said it was. Oh, look at this. He's eating right there. But this was a real typical meal. It was awesome. See, you missed it, I know. Right here, you got to have your tools for your... But this was a typical meal for us. It was just awesome. And then it'd rain. We'd get rainwater. David. And I want you to notice, this is something that really happened at dinner. Everybody would get tired, and they'd be sitting there talking, and then they'd nod off. Well, here, Arnie just crashed. And you can see Tom there. He's probably feeling the same way. Well, then he falls down. And then I'm sitting there, I'm having my beer, and then I fall asleep. So somebody caught that, though. That really happened. But and here we are. He's trying. This was the only, he hauled his bed out. I could tell you, you always knew it was going to rain at night because Dietmar, on the nights that he was the hottest, he would take his sleeping bed and he'd go all the way out to the ocean and he'd lay right next to the ocean. And what had happened, it'd start raining, and really raining, and you'd hear all of this German as he ran back to the tent. So we always, every time he went out, we knew it was going to rain. It's a predictor. Charlie sleeping. Here we're doing our little laundry service here. You'd go out and get your salt water and your Dove, and you'd wash it in salt water, and then you'd rinse it in rainwater, and this is where our dryers were. And the air was so humid there that it never dried. So you take a semi-dry shirt and you put it back on. And this is real typical of what some of this was from not sweating, not being able to sweat. What we noticed is we ended up with welts and puffiness all over us, and if you touched it, it would pop, and then it hurt very badly. And we found out later that was because we couldn't sweat properly. We'd get these great big bubbles, but this could be mosquitoes, I don't know, ants. There was see, this is what it looked like. It'd swell way up, and it'd pop, and then that was a rock. And we all have, we can show you marks from this neat trip. In fact, that's your leg. See that? He ended up in the hospital. When he got back, didn't even get home. He went right to the hospital. That was a spider bite, if I recall, and that was very infected. That happened, thankfully, at the end and not at the beginning, because I don't know how we would have treated it. But oh, guess who? What? There's Coco again, our mascot. So, but this is how thick it is out here. But Coco is also a seed, and there's the new tree. This is a path that went over to the other side of the island. And you could see lots of marks from the natives. This was the original plantation from the Jennings family when they settled the island, and that's where their main building was that they lived. And that it had been hit by a hurricane, and this is actually the second floor. The first floor is smashed underneath it. When I took a walk with a couple of guys at the end, we went down this pathway, and there was one of those friendly coconut crabs. But just keep in mind, their pinchers can break a coconut. So you wouldn't want to reach down and do anything with them. That would be a bad thing. This is the Freshwater Lake, which is just gorgeous. And I understand there's a scientific group coming back this year to go and do research in there, maybe see what's under there architecturally or archaeologically. But this is what it looked like from the as we're leaving, I guess you could say. This is just some of the native wildlife. I took this picture as the tide came in. You notice how it shot up in the air. I thought that was pretty cool. I waited and waited every time it would come in to see it shoot up in the air. I just thought that was a beautiful thing. And here we are getting ready to pick up Mark and Joe. On our last night there, they did something that I'll never forget. The whole crew came and entertained us. They served us food, and they played and sang all of their native songs for us. This is David and his son, and it was awesome. Come on, computer. There we go. We had all of the flags from the countries that were represented by our team. And there's Charlie enjoying the view with his little... There's the support team. That's how many people were there to help us. Isn't that cool? And that's our team. We made 105,455 QSOs, and one of the things that we're really proud of is that we had 26,000 unique calls that we worked. So that's 26,000 different people that got a chance to talk to Swains Island. Thank you very much for helping us make this a success. Last night it was announced that we were the DXpedition of the Year for last year by the SWADEXA, and so we were very honored to have that. We thought we had a really good team, and it came off very well. So thank you very much to Icom for the support. Yes.
Thank you, Craig.
Yes.